Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Now, let me tell you a story. I've lived in western North Carolina my entire life, just over the state line from Tennessee, tucked into the arms of the Blue Ridge Mountains. My family owns a few acres of wooded land near the edge of Nantahala National Forest. It's quiet out here, nothing but the distant cry of a hawk overhead, the whisper of wind in the trees, and the occasional sound of a truck struggling up the gravel roads. Most of the time it's peaceful, serene even. But every now and then the woods remind you that you're not really alone. I learned that the hard way. It started last fall. I'd taken a week off work to help my uncle restore his old hunting cabin up near Tusquatee Bald. It's way off the main road, no electricity, no cell service, and barely even a footpath to get you there. It had been in our family for decades, but no one had used it since my grandfather passed. My uncle wanted to bring it back to life, maybe use it again during deer season. The plan was simple: hike in, clean out the place, replace some floorboards, and fix up the roof before winter hit. I'd be alone the first 2 nights while my uncle finished up business in town. I didn't mind. I'd camped out there plenty of times growing up. The only difference now was I'd be doing it without my grandpa's old hunting rifle by my side. I hiked up late that afternoon, just as the sun was dipping behind the ridge. The trail was familiar, though a little more overgrown than I remembered. By the time I reached the cabin, the shadows were stretching long across the trees, painting everything in gold and gray. I got a fire going in the stone pit out front, cooked up some beans, and settled into a creaky old cot inside. That night, something felt off. I couldn't explain it at first. It wasn't the cold. I'd brought a thick sleeping bag. It wasn't the dark either. I've never been afraid of the dark. No, it was the quiet. Too quiet. Anyone who spent time in the deep woods knows there's always sound. Crickets, owls, frogs. The night comes alive when the sun dips. But that night, the forest held its breath. Not a chirp, not a hoot, nothing. Just the low crackle of the fire and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I lay there, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a bear had passed through, maybe a bobcat. They'll quiet the woods down for a while. Then I heard it, a crunch. Not like a squirrel darting through the underbrush. Not like a branch falling from a tree. It was the sound of a footstep, deliberate, heavy, slow. I sat up in bed, instinctively holding my breath. Another step, then another. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it through the dusty window, sweeping the woods in front of the cabin. Nothing. Then the footsteps stopped. I waited, still holding my breath, afraid to move. After a long minute, I turned off the flashlight and sat there in the dark, listening. Nothing else came. Eventually, I lay back down, but I didn't sleep. I watched the walls of that cabin until the sky turned pale blue. By morning, the birds were back. The wind rustled through the trees again. It felt almost normal. Enough that I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep-deprived and jumpy from being alone, that's all. I spent the day clearing brush, patching the roof, and replacing the front steps. I even found an old tin box of my grandpa's tucked behind a loose board in the wall. Inside were fishing lures, a pocket knife, and a little notebook. Most of it was just hunting notes and weather observations, but near the back, one entry caught my eye. Heard it again last night. Walks the ridge behind the cabin. Always stops when the light's on. Don't know what it is. Ain't a bear. Ain't a man. Too tall. Too quiet. Don't like how it watches. Might need to move camp if it comes back. September 16th, 1984. I read that entry over and over, feeling my stomach twist. My grandfather was a practical man, not prone to superstition. If he'd written something like that, I knew it had shaken him. That night I lit a fire again, but I kept the flashlight and my axe close by. The woods were alive like normal at first. The crickets chirped, the wind rustled the leaves, and an owl hooted up on the ridge. But around midnight, it stopped again. That same unnatural silence. No wind, no bugs, just nothing. Then came the footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. But this time they didn't stop at the edge of the trees. They came closer. I rose slowly, axe in hand, moving toward the front window. I flicked on my flashlight and aimed it into the darkness. Something stood just beyond the firelight. Tall, thin, taller than any man should be. Its limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way, as if it had been put together wrong. Its skin was stretched tight, pale and mottled, like meat left out too long. I couldn't see its face, not clearly, but I swear its eyes glowed faintly in the beam of my light. It stood still, unmoving, watching. I didn't move either. My breath hitched in my throat, and my hands went numb around the handle of the axe. Then it stepped back, one slow step into the dark, then another, and then it turned and melted into the trees. The sounds of the woods returned a few minutes later, as if someone had flipped a switch. Crickets, wind, the distant hoot of the owl. I stayed up the rest of the night, axe in hand, eyes wide, staring out that window. My uncle arrived just after sunrise the next morning. I didn't even let him unload his truck before I insisted we leave. I didn't tell him exactly what I saw. I just said there'd been something in the woods, something that didn't feel right. I haven't been back to that cabin since, and I won't. Whatever walks the ridge at night, it was there long before we were, and it doesn't want us there. I grew up in a tiny Appalachian town that barely shows up on maps anymore. It's one of those places you pass through on your way to somewhere more important, a dot on a back road flanked by dense pine-covered mountains and stretches of rust-colored shale. But ask anyone who grew up there, and they'll tell you the same thing. Don't go near Lantern Hill after dark. That's not the name on any map, mind you. That's just what we called it. The hill got its name from the lights, pale, flickering ones that drifted through the trees on moonless nights, like someone carrying a lantern through the woods. But the lanterns didn't belong to anyone. They floated too high, moved too smooth. Sometimes there were two, sometimes a dozen. People said they were spirits or miners who got trapped in a collapse back in the 1800s. still searching for the way out. Some said it was just gas from underground coal veins, igniting and glowing. Others weren't so sure. I didn't believe any of it. Not really. I chalked it all up to small-town boredom and old-timers trying to scare kids into staying close to home. But then I became a paramedic, and 3 years ago I had a call that changed the way I think about those lights forever. It was a cold October night. One of those nights where the clouds hang low and the mist rolls off the mountains like smoke. I was working an overnight shift, the kind where the roads are dead quiet and every little sound in the ambulance feels way louder than it should. Around 1:30 a.m., the radio crackled. Unit 7, report of an injured hiker off Cinder Hollow Road, near Lantern Hill. The dispatcher hesitated when she said the name, like she wasn't sure if she should. I remember glancing at my partner, Tom. He gave me a raised eyebrow, then shrugged. Probably some college kid screwing around in the woods, he muttered, popping a cough drop in his mouth. Bet you $10 it's nothing. I took the wheel, and we drove out into the night. The roads narrowed as we got deeper into the woods. Asphalt gave way to gravel, then to packed dirt. Fog pooled between the trees, and the air outside the cracked window smelled like wet leaves and iron. By the time we reached the trailhead, there was no one in sight, just our headlights cutting through mist and brush. We grabbed our gear and started hiking. The trail was steep and rocky, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Trees leaned in from both sides, their trunks slick with moss, branches arching overhead like skeletal hands. After 20 minutes we saw it, a single lantern, just floating there, faint, like a firefly trapped in glass. Tom stopped dead in his tracks. What the hell? It was maybe 40 yards ahead, just off the trail. I called out, "Hey, Ems, you okay?" No answer, just the soft bobbing of that lantern light. We moved closer, flashlights sweeping through the woods. But when we reached the spot where we'd seen the glow, there was nothing. No lantern, no person, not even footprints. Tom knelt down and brushed his hand across the mossy ground. Nothing. Then, from somewhere behind us, a voice called out, "Help, please." It was hoarse, weak, close. We turned on a dime, lights spinning toward the source. Another lantern. This one flickered on and off like a dying light bulb, but it was higher now, nearly 10 feet off the ground. I don't know what it was about that light, but something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't just light. It was watching us. The voice came again, "Help me," but it didn't sound human anymore. There was something broken about it. The rhythm of the words didn't match the tone. It was like someone had heard a human call for help once and was trying to copy it, and failing. Tom looked shaken. "This isn't right, man. We should call this in." I nodded, reaching for the radio on my belt. That's when the forest went silent. I mean dead silent. No wind, no leaves rustling, no distant creek, nothing. Like the whole mountain had sucked in a breath and held it, and then the lanterns multiplied. 1, 2, 5, 9, all around us between the trees, hanging in the air like stars that had fallen just a little too far, some high, some low. all of them swaying in perfect sync like they were breathing. Then they started moving, not toward us, not away. They began circling. Fast, erratic, like they were trying to hurt us. That's when the whispering began. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't a voice. It was voices layered on top of each other, all whispering different things, some in English, some in gibberish, some in tones that made my stomach turn. I grabbed Tom's arm. We need to go, now. He didn't argue. We turned and ran, stumbling back down the trail, flashlights bouncing, the fog swallowing everything behind us. But the lights followed. They flitted between the trees, darting through the brush, always just at the edge of sight. I felt them in my bones, like the air itself had teeth and was biting down on my spine. We burst back onto the trailhead and dove into the ambulance, slamming the doors shut. The moment we turned the engine on and flicked on the high beams, the lights disappeared. Gone, like they were never there. Back at the station, we filed the report. No one found. False alarm. We didn't mention the lights, or the voices, or the fact that Tom couldn't stop shaking for hours. We weren't believed anyway. A week later, a hiker was found near Lantern Hill, or what was left of him. No ID, no wallet, just shredded fabric, claw marks, and a shredded notebook with only one legible sentence. It wears the light, so we'll follow it. We still get calls up that way from time to time, and every time someone else goes missing. Now, when people ask me about the stories from back home, I don't laugh them off like I used to, because I've seen the lanterns. And I know now some lights are meant to guide you home. Others lead you somewhere you were never meant to come back from. I've always liked hiking alone. Something about being deep in the woods with nothing but the sound of my own breath and boots crunching along a dirt path calms me. There's no traffic, no buzzing phones, no constant noise, just space to breathe. I grew up in eastern Kentucky, not far from Letcher County, right on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. The kind of place where kids still ride their bikes past cool shuttered mines and you can hear cicadas humming from dusk till dawn. It's the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and doesn't let go. But there are places around here you just don't hike into. I learned that the hard way. It was late October, just as the leaves were peaking, all rust reds and burnt oranges bleeding down the mountainsides. I'd been working long shifts at the hardware store, trying to keep up with bills, and I needed a day off in the worst way. So I dusted off my pack and decided to hike an old trail my papa used to talk about, Cotton Ridge. The thing is, Cotton Ridge isn't on any map. My grandfather told me about it when I was a kid, sitting on his porch in the fall air, chewing Red Man tobacco and pointing to the tree line. You see them breaks in the ridge? That's where the old Cotton Trail starts. Don't go up there, though. They buried the wrong thing in the wrong place, and it never stayed down. I thought he was just being colorful, like old men do. Mountain people have a way of turning warnings into poetry. But that morning, standing at the base of the ridge with a thermos full of coffee and the trail in front of me, I didn't think twice. The path was barely there, half swallowed by years of overgrowth. You had to duck under branches and step over roots like nature was trying to take it back. But once you were about a mile in, it cleared. Wide enough for two, winding just beside an old, dry creek bed. It felt untouched, pure, and silent. That was the first thing that bothered me. I've been in the woods my whole life. You get used to a rhythm of sound. Crows cawing, squirrels darting, the occasional rustle of a deer. But this place, nothing. No birds. No wind. Just my footsteps, and they sounded too loud. I kept going, brushing it off. I told myself I'd just get to the overlook Papa always mentioned, have lunch, and head back before dark. But about 2 hours in, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. The trees started changing. The bark was stripped from most of them, not like weather damage or lightning scars. It was peeled back in long, deliberate spirals, like something had scraped around and around high up, 10, 12 feet. Then there were the symbols, carved into trunks every few hundred yards. Some looked like crosses, others like arrows pointing backward, not forward, backward. One tree had a circle with an X cut through it, and my first thought was, this is a warning. I stopped, stood there a minute, listening to nothing. Then I heard it, a branch breaking, but not close, right behind me. I turned around fast, light-headed, scanning the brush. My pulse was thumping in my ears. Nothing moved. No wind, but I could feel something was watching. I told myself to keep walking. I told myself it was just a deer or a bear or my imagination getting the best of me. But then I found the cabin. It wasn't on any map. It didn't look like it should have even still been standing. The roof was half caved in, vines wrapping the walls like ropes. A single window blown out, the door off its hinges, leaning against the frame, and above the door was a symbol, the same as before, a circle with an X. I should have turned back. Every part of me was screaming to leave, but I went inside. The floor creaked under my boots. It smelled like wet wood and old blood. There was a table in the center of the room, rotted and sagging, and in the corner was something covered in a canvas sheet. I approached slowly. My hand trembled as I reached for the edge, and when I pulled the tarp away, I saw bones. Dozens of them, animal mostly, but some too big for deer, long with knuckles, fingers, and carved into the skull in the center, the same eeks in a circle. I stumbled back, knocking the table over, scattering bits of old things across the floor, and that's when I heard the first voice. Not from someone inside my head. It was low, like a whisper made of teeth. You weren't invited. I ran, didn't look back, just tore out of that shack and down the trail, lungs burning, limbs numb. I don't know how long I ran, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. But then I realized I was going in circles, the same tree, the same rock, that same rotten symbol staring at me from a broken trunk. I was trapped. I dropped to my knees, tried to catch my breath, and that's when the silence broke. There was a rustling behind me, leaves crunching under heavy steps. Slow, measured. It didn't sound like someone walking. It sounded like someone dragging something long and wet. Then I heard breathing. Heavy, wet, close. I turned slowly and I saw it. Not a man, not an animal, something in between. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, covered in black hair, but patches were missing, revealing gray flesh underneath. Its arms were too long, ending in fingers that dragged the ground. And its head, God, its head. It looked like a skull, stretched and twisted with hollow sockets and no mouth, just a slit of skin that trembled as it breathed. On its chest was that same symbol, carved deep and raw. Bleeding. It didn't chase me. It watched, like it was deciding. Then it whispered again, not aloud, inside my head. You came alone. You stay alone. I ran again, and this time I found the path out. Just like that. Like it let me go. I didn't stop until I hit the trailhead, collapsed against my truck, and vomited in the dirt. I never went back. I don't hike anymore. I dream about it sometimes, the cabin, the bones, the trees with the spiral bark, and every dream ends the same. I see that figure, and it opens its slit of a mouth for the first time, and screams. I've been a backcountry ranger in the Blue Ridge Mountains for 16 years now. Most days, it's just the usual trail maintenance, idiot campers forgetting to douse their fires, and the occasional rescue when someone gets lost chasing waterfalls off the map. It's quiet work, mostly. Peaceful, even. But once in a while, something finds you out there. Something that doesn't belong. This story starts on a Thursday in early November. The cold was creeping in hard this year, frost already lining the leaves by dusk. I'd been stationed out near High Ridge, one of the more remote areas in the southern Appalachian stretch. Beautiful country, but the locals steer clear of it after Halloween. Say the woods wake up. Around them, just old folklore. Or so I thought. They'd been camping along a stretch of creek near an old fire tower that hadn't been used in years. I knew the place. Hell, I used to take my lunch there when I first started. Dispatch said they'd been out of contact for 36 hours. No cell signal, of course. Their last GPS ping put them near the old Miller trailhead. I packed a heavier loadout than usual radio, sidearm, extra light. The sun was already kissing the tree line when I started hiking in. By the time I reached the campsite, the moon was out full and fat, the kind that paints everything silver, but somehow makes the shadows darker. The first sign that something was off, dead silence. No bugs, no owls, no breeze, just the slow crunch of my boots and my own breath. Then I saw the tents, or what was left of them, ripped open like something had hooked them with claws and just tore. Gear was scattered, shredded sleeping bags, boots lying yards from the tents. No blood, no bodies, just chaos. I radioed in static, not a single bar. That's when I saw the first track. It was massive, twice the size of my boot. Barefoot, not human. The heel print was wrong, it was longer. The toes ended in claw marks that dug deep into the dirt. I knelt down and saw something else. Tufts of coarse, black hair caught on the corner of a tent pole. Thick, matted. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. even though I knew I'd never send it. I followed the prints away from the camp. They led into the woods, deeper into a ravine. That's when I started hearing it. Not the sound of something moving, no snapping twigs or rustling brush. Just breathing, slow, deliberate, deep, like something was following me. I picked up the pace, trying to stay calm. But the deeper I went, the stronger that feeling became, like I was being sized up. I should have turned back, but then I found the phone. One of the campers, face down in the mud-cracked screen. I picked it up, clicked the power button. Nothing, but the photo app was still open. The last image it captured was a blur of motion and glowing amber eyes. Eyes that were far too high off the ground to be any normal animal. That's when I heard the howl dot. It wasn't a coyote. Not even close. It started low, almost mournful. Then it climbed into a guttural snarl that rattled my chest. It echoed off the trees and made the night feel suddenly smaller, like the woods had closed in. I drew my pistol and backed up against a tree, scanning the darkness. Then I saw movement, something low, fast, just a shadow between the trees. I called out, "Ranger Service. If you can hear me, call out." Silence, then something replied, but it wasn't a voice. It was a growl, low and rumbling, followed by the snapping of branches. Whatever it wasn't scared of me. I turned to run and nearly tripped over a body. One of the missing kids. His eyes were open but empty, frozen in shock. His shirt was torn across the chest, deep gashes underneath, but oddly, no blood, like he'd been drained. I wanted to throw up, then I heard it again, closer this time. Breathing, I looked up, and that's when I saw it, standing just beyond the trees. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur. Its arms were too long, ending in clawed hands that twitched as it sniffed the air. But it was the face that haunts me. Like a wolf's, but wrong, elongated, almost stretched. The snout was too narrow. The eyes glowed like hot coals, and when it opened its mouth to snarl, I saw rows of jagged, broken teeth. Some looked human. It stepped forward, slow and deliberate, not afraid, curious. I raised my weapon, yelling, "Back the hell off." It didn't flinch. I fired once, missed. It lunged. I turned and ran, crashing through the brush, branches clawing at my face, blood pounding in my ears. I didn't look back, not until I reached the old fire tower. I slammed the rusted door shut behind me and climbed the ladder 3 rungs at a time. The tower swayed in the wind, old boards creaking. I made it to the top and drew my weapon again, panting, shaking. For a while, there was nothing but the wind. Then I heard the thump. It had climbed the stairs. The door below creaked open. It was coming. I backed into a corner, weapon raised, flashlight in my other hand, but the moment never came. No attack, no roar, just silence. And then a long, low growl that vibrated the floorboards. It waited down there all night, and just before dawn it left. I waited until full sunlight before coming down. When I made it back to the site, the other 2 bodies were gone. Only drag marks left in the dirt, heading north into the thickets. I never found them. The department classified it as a wild animal attack, They shut down the area, blamed it on bears, but it wasn't a bear. I know what I saw. I've been back once since then, just once. And when I did, I found a fresh set of tracks, bigger this time. It's still out there, waiting, watching. I've spent my whole life in the southern Appalachians. I grew up in a little town in northern Georgia, where the mountains rise like ancient gods, and the fog rolls in thick enough to swallow the trees whole. Folks out here keep their heads down. They don't ask questions they don't want the answers to, and they don't go looking for trouble in places it tends to live. I've been a ranger in the Chattahoochee National Forest for nearly 9 years now, and in that time I've seen a lot injured bears, lost hikers, flash floods, even a forest fire that almost ate a whole ridge. But none of that ever stuck with me like what happened last fall near the Tallulah Gorge. See, I usually volunteer for the remote solo patrols. Most guys don't like the isolation, but I prefer it. Gives me time to breathe, think. Plus, I've never had much patience for crowds. There's a ridge west of the gorge where a lot of locals go hiking. Steep, overgrown, and just far enough off the map that tourists don't stumble into it. That's where it happened. It was late October. The air had that sharp chill to it, and the leaves were bursting in red and gold like a firework finale. I just finished checking on a backcountry campsite near Panther Creek when I noticed something strange. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, just silence. And in the woods, silence isn't peaceful. It means something's watching. I chalked it up to maybe a bobcat or a black bear and kept walking. The trail I was on followed an old ridgeline that dipped down toward the gorge. There used to be a fire lookout out that way, long since torn down, but the foundation's still there, a little concrete platform surrounded by brush. I figured I'd head there and take my lunch. When I reached the platform, I sat down, took off my pack, and pulled out a sandwich. That's when I noticed something strange on the trees around me. Scratches. Not little claw marks like you'd expect from a bear. These were deep, long, and high off the ground, like something tall had dragged claws across the trunks on its way through. There were 5 distinct trees, all facing toward the gorge, all marked. I took a few photos, made a note, and finished my food quicker than usual. The silence hadn't let up, not a bird, not a breeze, just stillness. Then I heard something down the ridge. Movement. It was heavy, deliberate, snapping branches. Now I've tracked all sorts of animals through these woods, and you get a feel for weight distribution. A bear moves differently than a man. A deer is light and fast. But this sounded wrong. Too heavy for a person, too slow for an animal. Like something that didn't belong here was trying to sneak and failing. I stood up slowly and scanned the woods. At first I saw nothing, but then, just past the tree line, I caught a glimpse of it. At first I thought it was a man, maybe 6.5, 7 feet tall, lean, but it moved oddly, like its limbs weren't put together right. Its shoulders rolled too far, and its head hung low like it was sniffing the earth. I couldn't make out details, just the silhouette. Then it stopped and looked at me, not turned its head, looked. Like it had known I was there the whole time. I didn't move, didn't breathe. We stared at each other for what felt like minutes. Then it did something that chilled me to the bone. It smiled, not like a person, no lips, just its jaw hanging slack, teeth long and pale and too many. Then, just as silently as it had come, it backed into the trees like it was never there. I didn't eat the rest of my lunch. I hiked out of there fast, made it back to my truck by dusk, and didn't tell anyone. Not that day, what would I say? But that night, the dreams started. I was back at the platform, same day, same trees, but I was tied to one of them. I could hear it breathing in the woods, slow, deep, deliberate. Then it would whisper my name in a voice that sounded like someone choking underwater. I woke up drenched in sweat. The dreams didn't stop. Every night it got closer. I finally reported the scratches and strange noise to the district lead. Just said I'd seen large claw marks, maybe poachers messing with the area. They logged it and told me to stay clear of that zone until further notice. I didn't argue. A few days later, though, I heard from a fellow ranger. 2 hikers had gone missing off-trail near the gorge, close to where I'd been. Their car was still at the lot. No sign of them on the cameras, no campsite. Just gone. We started the search the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I thought to start looking, but I led the group straight toward the ridge. It took about 3 hours before we found something clothes, torn to pieces, half buried under leaves and mud. No blood, no bodies, just scraps of fabric and one hiking boot that still had a foot inside it. We crawled it in, flagged the area, and sent for the K-9 unit. But when they arrived, the dogs refused to track, wouldn't go near the ridge. One of them pissed itself and tried to run. That night I had the dream again, but this time I wasn't tied to the tree. I was inside the creature, looking out, seeing the woods from its perspective. Smelling everything, feeling hunger like I'd never felt in my life. And I remember thinking there's one more out here, just one more, like the thing knew I was in its head. I took a few weeks off after that. When I came back, I asked to be reassigned to a different section of the forest, somewhere with people, roads, noise. They gave me the Lake Burton area. Sometimes on cold nights when the fog rolls in, I swear, I can feel it again, watching. Whatever I saw out there in the gorge, it wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a man. It was something older, something that's always been here, and I think it knows my name now. I've worked with the U.S. Forest Service for most of my adult life. Wildland firefighting, trail recovery, rescue patrols, you name it. There's something about the wilderness that's always called to me, even when it scared the hell out of me. I was stationed out in the Monongahela National Forest back in 2019. We'd had a particularly dry fall, and the department was on edge. watching for fire risks. The mountains were tinder dry. One careless camper could spark a blaze that would eat the ridges alive. It was late October when I got a report of smoke somewhere near the Laurel Fork Wilderness, an area deep enough in that you'd have to hike half a day just to get to the outer edges. No roads, no cabins, no one should have been out there. I was paired with a guy named Wyatt, newer recruit, quiet, but good in the field. We set off from the ranger station before sunrise with gear, packs, and enough food for a 2-day patrol. Our goal was to track the smoke, confirm the source, and make sure it wasn't spreading. At first, the hike was calm, just the sound of boots on damp leaves and the wind whispering through the bare treetops. The forest was still clinging to the last bits of autumn, flashes of orange and red peeking through the gray. But after the first few miles, I noticed something strange. No birds, no bugs, no chipmunks rustling through the underbrush. The forest wasn't alive the way it usually is. Wyatt noticed it too. "You ever hear it this quiet?" he asked. "Not out here," I replied. It was like we were walking through a photograph, frozen in time. We kept moving, following the ridge that bordered the wilderness boundary. That's when we saw it. Not fire, just smoke. Thick, gray, and clinging to the trees like it was alive. It didn't rise like it should have. It hung low, creeping through the pines, coiling around the trunks and spilling into the hollows. We radioed it in, but got nothing. Static. No weather problems, just dead air. We decided to head deeper. Maybe someone had built an illegal fire. Maybe there was a downed lightning strike we hadn't heard about. But the deeper we went, the less it felt like a wildfire. We reached a ridge that overlooked a shallow valley, and there we saw it, an old, half-rotted wooden cabin, barely more than a shack. It wasn't on any maps. Not even the old trail overlays. No path led to it. It looked like it had been there a century, forgotten by everything but the trees. And smoke was pouring out of its chimney. "I thought you said this place was unoccupied?" Wyatt asked. "It is," I said. "At least it should be." We made our way down slowly. I could feel something in the air, a pressure in my chest, like a coming storm. We approached the cabin cautiously. The windows were covered in something thick and dark, like old resin or pitch. The smoke stank, too, not like firewood, but like something burned wet. Rotten. We knocked. No answer. Wyatt tried the door. It opened on the first push. The inside was worse than I expected. Dust thick on everything. Furniture that looked melted from heat. A dead fire in the hearth barely glowing, and there on the floor in front of the fireplace were bones. Not old ones, either. I crouched and looked closer. They'd been gnawed on, stripped of flesh, human. I turned to tell Wyatt to back out, but he was already gone. Gone. I shouted his name, stepped outside, but he wasn't there. His pack was still on the porch. His flashlight, his radio, everything just dropped like he'd evaporated. I shouted again. Nothing. The smoke in the trees had grown thicker. Now it clung to the ground like fog, wrapping around my boots as I stepped into the clearing. That's when I heard it. Not a voice, not an animal, but something like dry leaves scraping across skin. like breathing, but through waterlogged lungs. Then I saw the trees move. Something was in them, not moving through them, in them, like the trunks stretched and twisted as something passed through, warping the bark as if the forest was skin. Then a face, just for a second, at the edge of the smoke. It looked like Wyatt, but wrong. His face was stretched, his eyes black and sunken, his jaw hanging loose like it was unhinged. He opened his mouth, and what came out wasn't a scream or a shout. It was my voice begging for help. Then he vanished into the smoke again. I ran. I didn't stop. I tore through the trees, uphill through brambles, over rocks. The smoke chased me, thick and clinging. The forest bent around me, closing in like ribs. I heard more voices, all of them mine, some calling, some laughing. It was like something had swallowed the woods, and I was trapped inside its throat. When I finally collapsed, I couldn't breathe. I choked, clawed at my throat, and then the air cleared. The trees opened. I was standing back at the original trailhead, just like that. No smoke, no cabin, nothing but my own labored breathing and the sound of distant birds. I stumbled back to the station and reported what happened. I expected disbelief, maybe a suspension, but when I mentioned the cabin, the bones, and Wyatt disappearing, the supervisor just got quiet. Said he'd seen things up near Laurel Fork, too. Said the maps out here weren't always reliable. Sighed there were places in these mountains that didn't want to be found, places where the rules broke down, places that took people. They sent a search team for Wyatt. They never found him. Not even a footprint, just his gear, still on the porch of a cabin that wasn't there the next day. I haven't gone back to that stretch of the forest since. I still patrol. I still hike, but I keep to the mapped trails now. I don't chase smoke unless I see flames. And I don't walk into cabins that don't belong on paper, because I don't know what that thing was, but it wears our faces, and it's still out there. I've spent most of my life in the mountains, born and raised in Buchanan County, Virginia. It's a rugged, forgotten part of the Appalachians, where the forest goes on for miles and the old mining roads crumble into trails few people walk anymore. By the time I was 30, I'd already done a handful of backcountry rescue gigs, spent a couple years clearing trails for the Forestry Service, and hiked just about every ridge from Breaks Interstate Park down to Mount Rogers. But none of that prepared me for what happened in the fall of 2016 when I took my cousin Liam and his friend Brandon into the gorge. Locals just call it the Gorge. It's technically part of Jefferson National Forest, a deep cut through the cliffs along the Russell Fork River. It's beautiful, remote, steep, full of caves and forgotten hollows where no one's lived since the coal camps died out. Liam had always been one of those kids into urban legends. When we were little, he'd talk about the mimic man his grandma warned him about, a thing that followed your voice, copied people you trusted, tried to get you alone in the woods. I thought it was just old wives' tales. Anyway, Liam begged me to take him and Brandon camping in the gorge before the weather turned. We'd been close growing up, so I agreed. I thought it'd be good to get away, maybe show them the woods weren't anything to be scared of. We left on a Thursday morning in late October. The sky was gray, the kind of overcast that makes everything feel like dust, no matter what time it is. The trail into the gorge isn't marked, just an old rail grade, overgrown and slick with moss. We hiked about 4 hours in, followed the river past a rusted-out bridge that leads nowhere, and found a clearing deep in the valley to set up camp. Things were good at first. We pitched our tents, built a fire, and cooked dinner on a flat stone. The boys joked around, drank a couple beers, and I told them stories about old mining towns swallowed by the mountains. Brandon, ever the skeptic, kept rolling his eyes. That first night, something woke me up just after midnight. I didn't hear anything at first. Just that kind of silence that's so complete, it hums. Then I heard Liam whispering outside my tent, but it wasn't a normal whisper. It was hoarse, broken, like someone who'd been crying or choking. I could only catch pieces. No, wait, don't. I unzipped my tent and looked out. Liam was standing about 20 feet from camp, facing the woods, shoulders hunched, barefoot on the cold dirt. I called his name. He didn't turn around. Then he said something that froze my blood. He said my name in my voice, not his, mine. I backed into my tent, zipped it shut, and grabbed my flashlight. When I opened it again, Liam was gone. The fire had died down, casting just enough glow to show the prints he'd left in the frost. I ran over to Brandon's tent and shook him awake. Liam didn't come back for almost an hour. When he finally emerged from the tree line, he looked confused, pale, his pupils huge. He didn't remember getting up, didn't remember walking away, swore he'd gone to bed, and the next thing he knew, I was shaking him awake. Brandon didn't believe him. Hell, I barely did. The next day, we tried to laugh it off. Maybe he'd sleepwalked. Maybe we were overtired. We'd packed up and moved further down the river, just to shake the mood. That second campsite felt different. There was no wind. The birds were gone. Even the bugs were quiet. The whole place felt watched. I figured maybe a bear or a cougar was nearby, so I kept my sidearm loaded and close. That night we built a huge fire and stayed up late, trying to shake the nerves. Liam was quieter than usual. Brandon was twitchy, kept checking over his shoulder. We all finally turned in around 1 a.m. And that's when things went to hell. I woke up to a scream. Brandon screamed. I bolted out of my tent, flashlight and pistol in hand, and found Brandon about 20 yards from camp, backing away from something. And it was me, standing there in the tree line was me. Same jacket, same hat, same boots. Just standing dead still, staring at Brandon. Don't shoot, it said. It's me. But it wasn't my voice. It was off. Too slow, too smooth, like someone trying to sound like me. Then it grinned. The smile was too wide, too many teeth. I aimed my gun, but my hand was shaking so bad I didn't fire. The thing took a step forward, and then, like a flicker in a film reel, it was gone. Just gone. Liam came running up from the other side of camp. Said he saw Brandon walking toward the river. Only Brandon had never moved. That night we didn't sleep. We sat around the fire, weapons close, and every so often we'd hear something moving just beyond the tree line. Not walking. Stalking. Like it was circling us. Once we heard it laugh. It sounded like all of us at once. We left at first light. We didn't eat, didn't talk. We just packed up and hiked out as fast as our legs would carry us. Every now and then, I swear, I heard something pacing alongside the trail. Always just far enough away that we couldn't see it. It followed us all the way out. When we got back to the truck, I drove straight to a gas station off Route 460, where we sat inside for hours just trying to feel human again. We didn't talk much after that. Liam moved to Asheville. Brandon never went camping again. I stayed in the mountains, but I don't go into the gorge anymore. And if I ever do, I won't go alone. Somewhere in those woods, something wears our faces. It doesn't just mimic us. It becomes us. And every once in a while, on cold nights when I'm in the forest alone, I'll hear my name whispered behind me, spoken in my own voice. I've spent the last 14 years working as a backcountry ranger in the Monongahela Highland National Forest in West Virginia. That means I've seen a lot: twisted ankles, black bear encounters, missing hikers who weren't actually missing. But nothing prepared me for what happened last fall near Big Hollow. It started with a radio call from dispatch. An off-grid hunter hadn't returned to his cabin near Cheat Mountain. According to his brother, the man, Greg Harlan, was an experienced woodsman, but he hadn't made contact in 3 days. Normally, we'd let a few more days pass before mounting a search, but there had been reports of strange noises in that area. Low-frequency moans echoing through the valleys. A few hikers reported hearing things in the fog-deep growls and something too big to be a bear. I volunteered to check it out. I left early, hiking in from the east, with the plan to make camp near Big Hollow and search the surrounding ridges in the morning. The hike in was uneventful, just how I like it: cool air, damp earth, rustling leaves. But even in daylight, something felt off. The deeper I got, the quieter the woods became. No birds. No squirrels. Just the sound of my boots and the occasional creak of wind through brittle trees. By the time I reached Big Hollow, the sun had dipped below the hills, and the valley was swallowed in shadow. I found the hunter's cabin just before dark, a small one-room structure with a metal chimney and a rusted propane tank. His truck was parked nearby, keys still in the ignition. Inside the cabin, his gear was all there: rifle, pack, half-eaten jerky, but no sign of him. I checked the perimeter and set up camp about 50 yards from the cabin. Figured I'd get a fresh start at dawn. That night, something circled my tent. At first, I thought it was a deer. I heard the crunch of leaves, the soft shifting of weight. But it moved differently, heavier, slower. It never came into view, just circled. And then it stopped. I lay there, frozen, every muscle locked tight. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on, and swept the beam outside the tent flap. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching. I barely slept. At first light, I packed up and started combing the hills. I found boot prints heading northeast from the cabin. I followed them for about 2 miles until they ended at a patch of churned earth, like something had scuffled violently. Tufts of deer hair were tangled in broken branches, and there were deep gouges in the bark, claw marks, far bigger than any black bear I'd ever seen. There was a low mist in the air. It settled in like a blanket, clinging to everything and muffling sound. That's when I started hearing the breathing, deep and wet, like something with fluid in its lungs. I stood perfectly still, scanning the trees, and then I saw it. It was standing just beyond the fog line, maybe 30 yards out, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, long arms, misshapen joints. It had antlers, huge branching things, but its face was all wrong, too human. Wide, empty eyes and a mouth that hung open like a corpse left in the sun too long. Its chest heaved as it sniffed the air, and then it moved fast. I fired once, missed. I turned and ran. The next 30 minutes were a blur of sprinting, stumbling, and blind crashing through brush. I heard it behind me, never close enough to see, but always close enough to feel. It howled once, this awful sound that vibrated inside my bones, like metal scraping concrete mixed with a dying animal's last breath. Eventually, I lost it, or maybe it let me go. I don't know how I made it back to the cabin. I locked the door, shoved furniture against it, and sat there with my rifle in my lap until morning. When I finally had the nerve to go outside, I saw that it had come back. Massive footprints circled the cabin. There were claw marks on the door. Something had whispered my name through the cracks in the wood sometime around 3 a.m. They found me 3 days later, after I didn't check in. I told them Greg was gone. There was no body, no blood, just the signs of something unnatural. The official report says Greg Harlan was lost to exposure. A common enough ending for these woods, but I know better. Whatever hunts up near Big Hollow isn't an animal. It isn't a bear or a wolf or some guy in a costume. It's real, and it knows our names. I've been working wilderness search and rescue out in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado for almost 11 years now. That means long hours, unpredictable weather, and terrain that can kill a man just as quick as a grizzly. But the worst thing about this job, the thing no one warns you about, is that sometimes the woods give you something back you were never supposed to find. And sometimes they don't give anything back at all. This happened in early October, a few years back. A solo hiker named Caleb Doran went missing near an area locals call Blood Rock Pass, a craggy stretch of high-altitude switchbacks that zigzag through scree and pine, with a reputation even older than the Forest Service. The name comes from an old mining disaster where, so people say, half a dozen workers supposedly buried alive when a landslide took out a mule trail. But the locals talk about it like it's more than just a bad memory. They say something lives up there, something that sings when the wind dies. We don't put much stock in stories like that. Not officially, anyway, but Caleb was experienced. No history of medical issues. Solid GPS prep. He checked in with a ranger the morning he went up. Told them he was headed through the pass and down to Copper Basin. 4 days later, he hadn't shown up at the station. We sent a small team out first, 2 SAR guys and a sheriff's deputy. They came back the next day looking pale. Said they found Caleb's gear, his tent, his pack, even his boots, just abandoned right there on the edge of the switchbacks. But no sign of him, no blood, no prints, just silence. They requested backup. I volunteered. I left the next morning with a pack, a radio, and a loaded .357. I'm not usually the paranoid type, but there was something about the way the deputy talked about that campsite that left me unsettled. He said it was like Caleb had just stepped out to take a leak and never came back, not dragged, not attacked, just gone. The hike up through the lower meadows was uneventful, but the moment I stepped onto the trail up to Blood Rock, the air changed. No birds, no squirrels. The wind died down, and a stillness settled in, thick as snow. That's when I heard it, not loud, not clear, but music, soft, distant, like a woman humming. Not singing, just a wordless melody. I stopped dead in my tracks. The sound was coming from up ahead, somewhere past the next bend. I called out, "Caleb? SAR search and rescue? Hello?" Nothing. The humming stopped. I moved forward slowly, scanning the trail, one hand on the grip of my revolver. I turned the corner and found the site, just like they said. Tent unzipped, gear neatly arranged beside it, like someone had just stepped away, except the tent wasn't empty. Inside, on top of the sleeping bag, was a pair of socks, folded, clean. That's when the smell hit me. Not blood, not rot, something else. Sweet, almost chemical, like lavender and rust. I crouched by the tent and radioed in. "This is Unit 6. I've located the missing hikers' base camp. Still no sign of the subject. I'm going to continue toward the switchback. Over." No response. I tried again. Static. I stood up and looked toward the rocks above. Blood Rock isn't red like you'd think. It's this jagged gray shale, but at sunset it takes on this rust-colored sheen. The trail narrows up there. The drop on one side is nearly vertical, and if you're not careful, you'll lose your footing and never stop falling. I climbed slowly, one step at a time. The whole time I felt like I was being watched. That's not a feeling I get often, but that day, every sound echoed wrong. Every breeze felt like breath. And then, just before the next ridge, I saw something in the dirt. Bare footprints. No shoes, just one set. Leading up, they weren't Caleb's. They were too small, too narrow, almost delicate, like a woman's. But the weirdest thing, the prints were dry and warm. I followed them around the bend and found what I first thought was a body. I dropped to a knee, heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't Caleb. It was something else. The figure was curled into a fetal position on the edge of the rocks. Thin, pale skin stretched over a frail frame. No hair, no clothes, no gender. Just this blank, twitching shape, like a person molded from wax and left too long in the sun. Its limbs were wrong, too long, and its face was covered by a sheet of something like skin, taut and expressionless. It turned toward me. That's when I realized it didn't have eyes, but it could see me. It opened its mouth and let out a hum, the same tune I'd heard in the woods. I drew my gun and took a step back, my boots sliding slightly on the loose gravel. The thing twitched violently, once, then stopped. The humming grew louder, but the creature didn't move its mouth. It wasn't humming. The mountain was. The rocks around us began to vibrate, just slightly, like there was something deep inside, thrumming. I turned and ran full speed down the pass, nearly losing my footing 3 times. The humming chased me, echoing through the stones. When I got back to the tent, it was gone. I mean everything. The tent, the gear, the pack, even the socks. All that was left were those same bare footprints, now leading away. I didn't stop running until I hit the trailhead. The official report says Caleb Doran died from a fall. Body never recovered. Case closed. But I know better. Something lives near Blood Rock, something old and quiet and hungry. It doesn't kill you like a bear or a mountain lion. It calls you. And if you answer, you don't come back. I've been a backcountry ranger in Washington State for over 15 years now. That's a lot of miles walked, a lot of campsites checked, and more weird stories from hikers than I can count. You do this job long enough, the wilderness stops feeling like a place you're in and starts to feel like a place you're borrowing from something else. But there's one story I've never told, not to my wife, not to my station chief, not even to the guys who joke about Bigfoot over beers after work, because this one wasn't just strange, it was wrong. It happened about 7 years ago, in early November. I was checking trailheads along the southern edge of Olympic National Park, places where the season was winding down, but hikers still slipped in. Most folks are smart. They stick to the marked trails, camp where they're supposed to, and pack out what they bring in. But I'd gotten a report about an illegal fire ring set up somewhere off McKay Ridge Trail. A hunter had seen the smoke the day before and thought it looked like someone camping up near Deeper Hollow. Now, Deeper Hollow isn't on any map, and for good reason. It's a dip in the forest, a little basin where the trees seem to grow tighter and taller than anywhere else. The wind doesn't move down there. Birds don't sing. And every ranger who's ever patrolled the area has said the same thing. It just feels off. I set out around noon, packed light, radio, sidearm, thermos of coffee. The hike in was slow. The fog had settled into the ridge lines like soup, and everything past 30 feet looked like it was underwater. I found boot tracks about 3 miles in, fresh ones veering off trail toward the hollow. I followed them. The deeper I went, the quieter it got, like the woods were sucking sound out of the air. No wind, no branches creaking, just the sound of my boots on the soft earth. By the time I reached the basin, the light was starting to dim. It was maybe 3:30, but the trees were packed so tightly overhead that it looked closer to dusk. That's when I saw the camp, and I knew something was wrong immediately. The tent was one of those cheap blue pop-ups you get at Walmart, way too thin for late-season cold. There was a fire ring, sure, but it wasn't warm. Ashes were stone cold, no gear nearby, no pack, no food, just a tent, and what looked like a sleeping bag inside. I called out, "Hello, park ranger. Anyone here?" No answer. I stepped closer, unbuttoning the strap on my holster. Something about the air felt off, heavy, stagnant. I crouched by the tent and peeled the flap open. There was someone in the bag, or something. At first I thought it was a man, curled up tightly, but then I saw the way the limbs were bent too many joints. The bag was zipped up to the top, but the face sticking out wasn't right. The skin was pale, waxy, stretched tight. The eyes were open, glassy, but the mouth was moving. Not open, not talking, just slowly shaping into a grin. I stumbled back, pulling my weapon and radio at the same time. I pressed the button. "This is Ranger North. I've located the illegal camp near Deeper Hollow. There's a body here, unknown subject. I don't think he's alive. Requesting backup and med evac. Over." Static. I moved away from the tent, trying to find higher ground for a signal, when I heard it. Snap, dot, dot. Behind me. I turned, weapon raised. Nothing. I scanned the trees, heart pounding, when I heard another noise, a voice, whispering. At first I couldn't make it out, then it got clearer. It was my name, over and over. "Daniel, Daniel," I called out, voice cracking. "Who's there?" The whisper stopped. Then, 20 feet ahead, I saw someone step out from behind a tree. It was me, dot, dot, same ranger uniform, same hat, same beard. But the thing wearing my face wasn't right. Its skin was gray, eyes pitch black. Its mouth opened too wide, and it screamed. Not a human scream, a ripping, high-pitched wail that vibrated in my bones. I fired twice. The thing jerked, stumbled, and vanished into the trees like smoke. I turned and ran. Branches whipped past me. The fog had thickened again, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs were on fire, until I couldn't hear the thing behind me anymore. I stumbled into a clearing I didn't recognize and collapsed against a fallen log. I stayed there, shaking, until the sun started to rise. When I finally found my way back to the trailhead, it was nearly noon. I called in. Backup arrived an hour later. I told them I got lost in the fog and that the camp was empty when I arrived. I said I must have imagined the face in the bag. They believed me. Or they pretended to. Later, I went back. The tent was gone. No sleeping bag, no ashes, no tracks. Like nothing had ever been there. I don't go near Deeper Hollow anymore. Not because I'm afraid of dying, but because I know it knows me now. And it wears my face when it walks.